Well, look, again, rookie mistake. I did not give my power ratings on Sunday. So let me run through those real quick. And since you're here, Brogan, I'll let you kind of punch holes here. Tell me where you disagree. Number one, I have Georgia. I know that's kind of a hot take right now because they've played so many teams tightly, but I think this Georgia team is unbelievable. Just the depth they have is, look, even Carson Beck, man, he hasn't really had a bad game. There's been some quarterbacks around the country who have really high highs and really low lows, and he's just had no low lows. Like he has not had any lows this year. He's just been incredibly consistent, and with the supporting cast around him, Georgia's damn good.
Yeah, and like Bowers being out, you got McConkey, you have help. Like they're 3 deep at the most important position in their offense, and if you can kind of rip and replace that, I think you're set if your defense can hold on, which they have the best defense in the country. So
yeah, number 2, I have Michigan. I think the thing with Michigan, it's a little bit weird because they haven't played anybody. They've beaten the piss out of everybody they played. They've done exactly what they're supposed to do. But we haven't seen them be tested, really. And so, there is a little bit of inflation that happens when you keep beating crappy teams really bad over and over and over and over. You could say this team's really, really good, but in reality, they're only as good as you thought they were in the beginning. They're just doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, I'm just maintaining that because even in the beginning, I had them at number 1. So me putting them at number 2 is not saying, I think they've gotten better as the season's progressed. I think they're still one of the top 2 teams in the country, and I've maintained that opinion all year. This is where there might be some controversy. At number 3, I have Oregon.
Yeah. I looked up because as a Bama guy, they have us way lower than them, and Texas, and they have the 65th strongest strength of schedule, and then the only loss they have is the UW, who has the 75th.
Yeah.
So I get it. I mean, I'm a Bo Nix hater. That's just from college. So seeing him succeed kind of hurts. But they're not a bad program. Oregon's Oregon, the Pac-12. Like, I want to see them in it. I do. But I think they're a little overrated. So them being at your 3 kind of fits my mantra in that aspect.
Yeah. I don't necessarily disagree with you. Like the strength of schedule point. Their only loss being to Washington, who has a even worse strength of schedule. I understand that entirely. But this is a power rating. It's not a ranking system. If I was ranking teams, I would probably have Washington over Oregon right now because they're undefeated and, won that game head-to-head. Oregon was favored in that game, and I think rightfully so. And if they played again, I think Oregon would be favored by probably even a wider margin. So that's why I have them up there. I think they're top to bottom. Bo Nix has the most experience of any quarterback who's ever played college football, at least FBS. That's incredible. That's insane. And he's in the Heisman conversation. Like, dude's balling. On top of that, the defense is the best in the it's the best in the Pac-12 right now, right there with Utah and Oregon State. Like, they're one of the best defenses. Any defense that's Dan Lanning led, they're going to be really good. And with an offense as good as they are, Troy Franklin, Bucky Irving, like, it's going to be a team that if they, as long as they can hold out the rest of the year, not drop a game to Oregon State late like they did last year, I think they're going to get that shot at Washington, that rematch. And if they win that, it's going to be really hard to keep them out the playoff.
I agree.
Number 4, Ohio State. So, I have them below Michigan right now, but you're talking about a fraction of a point differential. I know they have the win over Penn State. So, look, if you were going to tell me that you'd have Ohio State over Michigan, I wouldn't argue with you too much. I think this is, if I were to put odds out, the Michigan-Ohio State game played on a neutral field, I'd have it less than 1 point either way, the spread. So, if you told me Ohio State was better than Michigan, I wouldn't disagree with you. Right now, I'm just giving the nod to Michigan just slightly. And Ohio State will have they'll have an opportunity to prove me wrong in that. So, we'll see what happens in that game. 5, I have Penn State. So, yes, they did lose to Ohio State a couple weeks ago. And I think that's fine. I had them rated below Ohio State at the time. I figured they would lose that game. And that was just affirmation. It wasn't that I had somebody tell me I had Penn State way too high because they got beat by Ohio State. I was like, bro, I had them below Ohio State. Like, just because I had them high and they lost to a team that I had higher than them, why should I drop them? Like, they did exactly what I thought they were going to do. But, whatever. So, yeah, that's my top 5: Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State. 6, I have Florida State. This one was tricky for me because I do think that when they're at their best, they're right there in the mix. If I'm doing a ranking system, they deserve to be in the playoffs right now. I just don't know if they can get a playoff win currently. But yeah, I think at their best, they're a true top 4 to 6 team. Problem is they're not consistently at their best. They let a lot of teams hang in there that they probably shouldn't. And to their credit, they're gritty and they find ways to win those games and they pull it together, whether it's scoring on defense or finding a big special teams play. Like, they've been able to do that, and I think that is a attribute of a really, really, really good football team. I'm not going to say great yet because I don't think they can get a playoff win right now. Hell, they might not get to the playoffs. They're probably going to have to see Louisville in the ACC championship game, and that one's going to be interesting. But right.
Yeah, I think I flipped them with Oregon personally, but they do have Georgia syndrome in the first half of a lot of those games where they just come out slow and they just rely on Jordan Travis and those transfers like Keon Coleman to come in. I think their ceiling's really, really high, but I like their coach a lot as well. But I see what you're saying. I mean, should be wins, should be by 20, 30 points, and they're just not.
So you'd bump them all the way up to 3?
Yeah.
Over Ohio State, Michigan. Okay.
No, I'd have Michigan, and then
over Ohio State and Penn State. That's what I meant. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that? And again, we're talking about fractions of a point differential, so I'm not going to argue with you too much about that. But
yeah, I don't know. The ACC is weird, so it's hard to kind of vouch for how strong they are. But I don't know. I like FSU being back, and I think that they just have the ability to. I think they could beat like Oregon. Like if those two were in a playoff game, I think they actually win that one. Now the others, not so much. But I do think they can. I think they could beat the best Pac-12 team.
Interesting. So I have my top 5 are all very close together for me. Like, it was really hard to where I was going to place those 5 teams. It wasn't that difficult for me to put Florida State at 6. In meaning that figuring out my top 5, I was like, okay, there's definitely 5 teams that deserve to be here, but where do I place them in terms of who I would favor on a neutral field? Florida State didn't make that conversation for me. I do think they're a top 6 team. That's why I have them at 6, but I felt like there was a clear tier break after 5. I get what you're saying, though. I don't necessarily I do disagree with you, but I understand your point.
Yeah, and I just think the tier break is at 6 instead of 5 for me.
Okay.
With the teams you've listed.
So for me, at 7, I have Washington, which I think is a much more dynamic offense and not nearly as good of a defense, but a very opportunistic defense and a defense that can get to the quarterback and force the turnover, and hasn't been amazing on third down, but has shown the ability to get the big play on third down. So I think Florida State, Washington on a neutral field, like, I would love to see that bowl game.
That'd be a great bowl game.
Okay, but if you had if you had Florida State at 3, where would you put Washington? I guess in your power rating, where would you put Washington? Because I'm just trying to.
I'm still having them. I'm still having that line is 7. I'd say that'd be a good game, but I just think that Oregon game would be so much better.
Okay, fair enough. At number 8,
kind of like how we talked about before the show, we think Oregon's. If they replayed that game on a neutral site, we think Oregon's winning by a decent margin.
Yeah.
Not double digits, but like decent.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, so you'd put Oregon 1 tick above Washington. Gotcha. At number 8, in the grand scope of things, right, there's 133 FBS teams. 8 is really, really high. But when I'm speaking to an Alabama fan, and at number 8 I have Alabama, is that too low for you, or you think that's about right?
That's about right. I mean, we came out slow. If you were judging us off the past 4 weeks, give me the 2 slot. But unfortunately, you can't do that. So it's fine. Our defense came around. I think we're the best halftime adjustment defense in the country. coming off of like Ole Miss, Tennessee, and LSU. I think we've given up 10 to 13 points in the second half.
10, yeah.
So it's there. We just need the consistent offense. If the offensive line could grow up a little bit, that'd be beautiful. Give Jalen a little bit more time. But it's fair. Like, I think that's a very fair spot to put them. I appreciate the bump over Texas.
I will say, going into that LSU game, Alabama had given up 35 sacks. That is bottom 5 in the entire country. Only gave up 1 against LSU. So you said if that offensive line could grow up a little bit, they did. They did in that game.
Yeah.
Now, you know, on the flip side of that coin, I don't think they brought 5 or more than 4 times. So they were rushing 4, but I mean, hey, that offensive line, they've given up, again, 35 sacks going into that game, and after that game it was 36. So holding them to just 1 sack was, to me, not something I was expecting to see. So big props there.
Yeah.
At number 9, I have Texas. So again, I know Texas has the head-to-head win over Alabama, and I'm just preaching to the choir talking to you because I know you understand what I'm saying. But Texas has the head-to-head over Alabama, but right now Alabama is a better team than Texas. If Alabama and Texas played on a neutral field, Alabama would be favored. If Alabama played at home, they'd be pretty heavily favored in my opinion. And I think that's that. Look, from week 2 to week 10, Alabama has gotten increasingly and significantly better. And in that same time frame, outside of the defensive line in the run game for Texas, it feels like Texas has just slightly regressed, rather. So still top 10 team, still number 9 in my book. But if you're going to ask me why I have Alabama over Texas, that's why. And at 10, I have Ole Miss. We'll see. We'll see what happens this weekend. But if your argument, don't come to me with the argument that Georgia's going to boat race Ole Miss. That very well could happen. That's not my prediction, by the way. I'm taking, before we even get into that game, I'm taking Georgia money line and Ole Miss to cover. But if your argument is you're coming to me saying Ole Miss is way too high, they don't deserve to be in the top 10 because Georgia's going to dominate them, okay, that's fine. You can have that opinion. But I have Ole Miss 10 spots below Georgia. So, like, I'm not disagreeing with the argument that you're coming to me with. My disagreement is that doesn't make Ole Miss not a top 10 team. There's not 10 teams better than Ole Miss right now, in my opinion. All right, so that's my power ratings.